Hi, my name is Madison Carter, and I'm 24 years old. People often assume that being born into wealth means living an easy, beautiful, and worry-free life, but my reality has always been far from that glittering picture. I grew up in a quiet, elegant neighborhood in Austin, Texas, in a house that was far too big for a family of three. My parents were everything to me, my comfort, my security, my entire sense of belonging. But everything changed the night their car skidded off a wet highway during a late drive home. I was only 19 when I got the call that shattered my world and left me standing alone in a silent house filled with memories I wasn't ready to face. Since that day, loneliness has been the only constant companion in my life. When lawyers sat across from me in my parents' old study and informed me that I was the sole heir to a $5 million estate, I remember feeling numb, not happy. Money couldn't replace the warmth of my mother's voice or the strength in my father's reassuring smile. I signed papers, nodded politely, and moved through those days like a ghost, completing responsibilities I didn't even understand yet. I inherited their homes, their investments, and every last piece of their lives, but nothing felt like a gift. It all felt like a burden I never asked for. I decided to continue my education to distract myself from the emptiness that followed me from room to room. I enrolled in a private university in Austin and chose business administration because it was the field my father always talked about with passion. I thought maybe through that degree, I could feel a piece of him again. But campus life wasn't what movies promised. I wasn't the girl laughing with a big friend group or enjoying parties. I attended classes, completed assignments, and returned home early. Most days, I sat by myself in the corner of the university library, pretending to study while actually staring blankly at the same sentence for hours. People knew my last name, Carter, but not me. Some treated me differently because of it, either with curiosity or calculated friendliness. I kept my distance from everyone, afraid of trusting someone who only wanted to benefit from the fortune attached to my name. I rarely spoke unless necessary. I didn't socialize. I didn't open up. I didn't even know how to anymore. And although I lived in a beautiful house, drove a new car, and never had to worry about bills, I still felt like I was carrying an invisible weight no one else could see. There were nights when I would sit on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering why life had chosen to take everything from me so early. I missed my parents desperately. I missed feeling safe. All I wanted was someone who genuinely cared. Not about my money, not about my name, not about the estate or the inheritance, just me. But deep down, I had already convinced myself that people like that didn't exist. I never imagined that someone would soon walk into my life pretending to be exactly that person. I never imagined that the loneliness I tried to escape would lead me directly into the arms of someone who would eventually destroy everything I had left. I still remember the first time I saw him, so vividly that sometimes it feels like my memory is playing a cruel joke on me. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning, one of those days when the sky looks washed out and the air feels heavy, as if nothing special is ever going to happen. I was walking across the university courtyard with my headphones in, pretending to be lost in music, so I didn't have to make small talk with anyone. My routine was simple: arrive, attend classes, avoid attention, and leave as quietly as I came. I liked being invisible. Or, at least, that's what I told myself. But then I saw him. He was standing near the outdoor tables beside the business building, laughing with a group of friends. His laughter carried a confident, easy sound that didn't match the constant quiet that surrounded my life. He wore a dark jacket, backpack casually hanging from one shoulder, and his hair fell slightly over his forehead in a way that almost looked intentional. What caught my attention wasn't his looks, though. It was the way he carried himself. Comfortable, charismatic, like someone who belonged everywhere he went. I envied that ease because I had never known it. I stopped for just a second, almost without realizing, and he happened to glance in my direction. Our eyes met briefly. Not long enough to call it anything meaningful, but long enough for my heart to skip in an unfamiliar way. I looked away instantly, embarrassed by the fact that I had actually stared. I kept walking, hoping he hadn't noticed how flustered I suddenly felt. Later that day, I saw him again in one of the hallways. He was alone this time, leaning over a vending machine trying to make it accept his dollar bill. He looked frustrated, muttering something under his breath. I slowed down, but only for a moment, debating whether I should just keep walking or pretend I didn't see him. Before I could decide, he looked up and smiled. "Hey, do you happen to have change?" he asked. His tone was warm, casual, the kind of voice that made it hard not to respond. I shook my head gently.
"Sorry."
"I don't." "It's okay," he laughed softly. "This machine hates me anyway." He stepped back, giving up on his battle with the dollar bill, and for a moment I thought he would walk away. Instead, he extended a hand. "I'm Ethan," he said. I hesitated, then slowly shook his hand. "Madison." "Madison," he repeated, as if testing the sound of my name. "Nice to meet you." There was something disarming about the way he said it, like he genuinely meant it.
I wasn't used to that.
Most people at the university either acted overly friendly because of my last name or avoided me because they thought I was snobbish. But Ethan looked at me like I was just normal. Just another student. Just a person. Maybe that's why I didn't immediately pull away. Our conversation was brief, small talk, really what classes we were taking, how our day was going. Nothing deep. Nothing that should have mattered. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. When we parted ways and I walked toward my next class, I found myself thinking about his smile, the warmth in his voice, and how unexpectedly comfortable he had made me feel. If only I had known then that this simple moment, this innocent interaction near a vending machine, was the beginning of a story that would change every part of my life. If only I had realized that sometimes danger doesn't look like danger at all. Sometimes it looks like a friendly smile and a hand extended in kindness. After that vending machine conversation, I honestly didn't expect to see Ethan again. The university was big enough, and my routine was quiet enough, that people rarely crossed my path twice unless they shared a class with me. But somehow, Ethan kept appearing in small, almost perfectly timed moments that felt accidental then. But now, looking back, I'm not so sure they really were. At the time, though, I didn't question anything. I was too used to being alone and too unprepared for someone who suddenly wanted to be around me. The day after we first talked, he found me sitting alone on a bench near the business building, waiting for my next lecture. I was scrolling through my phone, pretending to be busy. He walked toward me with the same easy confidence that had caught my attention before. "There you are," he said cheerfully, as if he had been looking for me. "I owe you a proper introduction. Yesterday was too rushed." I almost laughed at the idea that anyone looked for me. I wasn't used to being someone people sought out. I closed my phone and nodded. I guess we were both in a hurry. He sat beside me, not too close, not too far, just close enough to make me notice, but not enough to make me uncomfortable. He asked about my classes, my major, my interests. Most people asked out of politeness and then drifted away. Ethan actually listened. Every time I spoke, he tilted his head slightly, giving me his full attention. It was unfamiliar, strangely comforting. Over the next few days, these small interactions became more frequent. He would accidentally bump into me outside the library or show up near the coffee shop just as I was leaving class. Sometimes he'd ask if I wanted to walk with him. Other times he'd sit with me in the cafeteria, even though I always ate alone before he came into my life. At first, I kept my guard up. I answered politely, but never shared anything personal. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, he was just friendly, and I was just being cautious. But the truth was, a tiny part of me started waiting for his smile, his voice, his questions. I didn't realize it then, but Ethan was slowly weaving himself into the quiet spaces of my life. One afternoon, after a long lecture, I was struggling with a heavy project bag. Ethan showed up beside me like he had been waiting around the corner. "Here," he said, taking it from my hand before I could protest. "You'll hurt your shoulder carrying all this." "I can manage," I said, awkwardly. "I know," he replied with a small smile. "But you don't have to." Those 5 words stayed with me the whole evening. You don't have to. I had spent years managing everything alone, my home, my grief, my life, my silence. Hearing someone say I didn't have to felt new. Strange.
Soft.
Soon he began studying with me in the library. At first he sat across from me, but gradually he moved closer, sharing notes, cracking small jokes that made me smile despite myself. He brought me coffee sometimes, my favorite, though I never told him what I liked. Somehow, he had already learned. And then there were the little things. The way he held doors open. The way he noticed when I was tired. The way he walked me to class even when it wasn't on his way. The way he asked if I had eaten. The way he treated me like someone worth knowing. For someone who had lived in silence for so long, these gestures felt like warmth drifting into a cold room. I began to relax around him. I began to look forward to seeing him. I began to share small details, my love for books, my struggle with loneliness, even a few memories of my parents that I rarely spoke about. And he listened every time, offering understanding, comfort, and the kind of kindness I had convinced myself didn't exist anymore. Slowly, the stranger I met at a vending machine became my first real connection in years. I didn't know it yet, but trust was forming, quietly, gently, dangerously. If only I had known that trust was the very thing he needed from me, and the very thing that would cost me everything. It's strange how love doesn't arrive all at once. It slips in quietly, almost unnoticed, until one day you look back and realize how every little moment was leading you somewhere you never expected to go. That's how it happened with Ethan. There wasn't one single instant where I thought, this is it. I'm falling for him. Instead, there were hundreds of small moments, soft conversations, shared smiles, unexpected laughter, that slowly began stitching themselves into something deeper. It started with our study sessions. What used to be silent hours in the library turned into comfortable routines. He would sit across from me, tapping his pencil against his notebook rhythmically, glancing up just to make sure I was paying attention to my work and not drifting away into the darkness of my thoughts. Sometimes he'd slide me a sticky note with a joke written on it, or make a silly comment under his breath that forced me to hide my smile behind a textbook. I didn't want him to know how easily he could brighten my mood, but I think he already knew. Then came the walks. After class, he'd casually ask, "Want some fresh air?" And somehow it always felt like I did. We'd stroll through the courtyard lined with old oak trees, talking about everything and nothing, future plans, silly fears, random memories. He told me about his childhood, his dreams, and even the failures he was embarrassed about. I was surprised at how open he seemed, how vulnerable he allowed himself to be. It made me feel safe enough to share my own thoughts in return, little by little. For the first time since losing my parents, I felt like someone was truly seeing me, not the heiress, not the quiet girl in class, just me. One Friday evening, he asked if I wanted to try a new cafe that opened near campus. It wasn't technically a date, not in the way people define dates, but it felt like one. The cafe was cozy, with warm lighting and soft music playing in the background. He ordered something sweet and insisted I try it. When I tasted it, he watched my reaction with a quiet smile, like the moment mattered to him. I didn't question it. I liked the feeling of being cared for. But the moment everything shifted came a few weeks later. We were sitting on the grass near the campus fountain, watching the sunset bleed orange into the sky. A gentle breeze passed by, brushing my hair across my face. Before I could move it, Ethan reached out, tucking a loose strand behind my ear. His fingers brushed my cheek, warm and soft. I felt my breath catch, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Something between us changed in that second. His eyes lingered on mine a little longer than usual, and my heart reacted in a way I couldn't control. "Madison," he whispered, almost as if he was afraid of breaking the moment. "You're different. In a good way. A really good way." I didn't know what to say. No one had spoken to me like that in years, maybe ever. I looked away not because I wanted to, but because his gaze felt too honest, too intense, too much like the kind of emotion I wasn't prepared to handle. Another turning point came shortly after that. I had a terrible day. Exams, exhaustion, old memories weighing on my heart. Ethan noticed the second he saw me. He didn't ask what was wrong. He simply sat beside me, offering silent company. After a few minutes, he gently reached for my hand. I didn't pull away.
I didn't want to.
For the first time since my parents' death, someone's touch didn't feel intrusive or overwhelming. It felt grounding, comforting.
Real.
From that day forward, things changed. We weren't just study partners or casual friends anymore. He started walking closer to me, sitting closer, speaking softer. I started smiling more, trusting more, letting myself feel something I had convinced myself I didn't deserve anymore: affection, connection, closeness. I remember lying in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, replaying our moments together. For the first time in years, my heart felt warm.
Alive.
I whispered to myself, I think I'm falling for him. And the terrifying part was, I wasn't scared. I should have been. Because that warmth I felt, that trust, that softness, that love, was exactly what he needed me to feel. Before he broke me completely. Graduation week felt like a blur of emotions I didn't quite know how to process. For most students, it was a celebration. Families filling the campus, flowers in hand, proud parents taking pictures, laughter echoing through hallways. For me, it was bittersweet. I walked across the stage in my cap and gown, the sun warm against my face, and when the announcer called my name, Madison Carter, the applause felt strangely hollow. There was no one in the front row waving at me. No one holding flowers. No familiar voice cheering my name. I told myself I was used to it, but a quiet ache still formed in my chest. I clutched my diploma, whispered a soft "I did it," and tried to convince myself that this was enough. Ethan, on the other hand, made sure I didn't feel alone. Right after the ceremony, he appeared in front of me, smiling wide and genuine, carrying a small bouquet of white lilies, my mother's favorite flowers. For a moment, I froze. I had never told him that. I didn't even talk about my mother's preferences. How did you know? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shrugged lightly, brushing his thumb over my cheek. You mentioned it once months ago. I remember the things that matter to you. It felt like something inside me softened. No one had remembered things for me in a long time. We spent the next few days celebrating in our own quiet way. No parties. No big gatherings. Just the two of us. We walked along the river, ate at small cafes, watched an outdoor movie screening near campus, and made plans, big, hopeful plans about the future. I still didn't know much about his family, except that they weren't very close, and he brushed off most questions with a light laugh or a quick subject change. I didn't press him. I was too wrapped up in the comfort of finally having someone who felt like home. The night he proposed is still carved into my memory. We were standing at the top of Mount Bonnell, overlooking the sparkling city lights of Austin. The breeze was cool, brushing against my skin, and for a moment everything felt peaceful. Ethan stood behind me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders as we watched the city glow beneath us. I know you've been alone for a long time, he whispered near my ear, and I want to change that if you'll let me. When I turned around, he was already on one knee, holding a small velvet box. Inside was a simple yet elegant ring. Nothing flashy, nothing overly expensive. Just a delicate band with a solitaire diamond. Something timeless. Something thoughtful. Madison, he said softly, I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? My heart raced, and for a moment, I felt the world steady itself under my feet. No one had ever offered me forever before. No one had looked at me the way he did, with warmth and certainty. So I said yes. I whispered it at first, then said it again louder, tears forming in my eyes. Ethan pulled me into his arms, spinning me slightly as the city lights shimmered below us. Our wedding was small, very small. There were no relatives on my side and only a few friends from his. We chose a quiet venue near a lakeside cottage, decorated with soft lights and white flowers. I wore a simple dress. Ethan wore a charcoal suit. There was no extravagant reception, no ballroom, no luxurious displays. Just vows, rings, and the promise of a shared life. As we exchanged our vows, Ethan held my hands tightly, looking into my eyes with a tenderness that made my heart swell. You're my family now, he whispered. And in that moment, I believed him. I believed every word, completely unaware that the man I had just married wasn't promising me a lifetime. He was quietly planning a future where my trust, my love, and my entire inheritance would belong to him alone. In the beginning, marriage felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. Ethan was attentive, gentle, and surprisingly supportive. He helped me adjust to our new routines, cooked dinner with me, and sometimes left little notes on the kitchen counter telling me he loved me. I clung to those gestures like lifelines, believing that I had finally found someone who wanted me, not my money. If only I had known that those sweet moments were nothing more than carefully placed stepping stones leading to the trap he had planned all along. The first time he mentioned my inheritance, it sounded harmless. We were sitting at the dining table one evening, reviewing some upcoming bills and organizing our weekly schedule. He glanced at a document on my laptop and casually said, "You know, handling all this on your own must be stressful." I didn't think much of it. I shrugged and told him I was managing fine because I was. Managing my parents' estate had become a part of my life, something I had learned to handle even with the grief that came with it. A few days passed before he brought it up again, this time more directly. We were having breakfast, sunlight spreading across the kitchen like a soft blanket, when he said, "Madison, you shouldn't have to deal with all the financial pressure alone. That's what partners are for." His tone was warm, supportive, and I felt a flutter of appreciation before I reminded him gently that I was comfortable handling my own affairs. He nodded, but the look in his eyes lingered a moment too long. Curious, calculating. Then the pressure began. It started subtly. Comments slipped into random conversations. "I just want to help you. You trust me, don't you? You don't have to carry everything by yourself." At first, I believed he meant well. I thought he was simply trying to be a good husband. But the comments became more frequent, more pointed. He began questioning my decisions, suggesting that I didn't understand investments, hinting that the estate might suffer under my inexperience. I felt small, insecure, feelings I rarely had before marriage. One night, after a minor disagreement about a maintenance decision for one of the rental properties, Ethan's tone changed. There was an edge to his voice I had never heard before. "Madison," he said sharply, "this isn't a game. You're sitting on $5 million. One mistake, and it's gone. I'm only trying to protect our future." Our future. The word stung. Because something in his voice didn't sound protective at all, it sounded possessive. I tried to explain that this inheritance wasn't just money to me. It was my parents' lives, their sacrifices, their dreams. But he sighed loudly, as if I were being unreasonable. "Madison," he said, lowering his voice in a practiced softness, "I love you. But you need guidance. Let me handle everything. Just put it under my name. It will be safer." The request struck me like cold water. "Put it under your name?" I asked, stunned. "Ethan, this is my family's legacy." He ran a hand through his hair, pretending to be frustrated. I know, he said. "But legally, it's easier if everything is combined. Married couples do this all the time. Why are you making this difficult?" His words lodged in my chest like thorns. For the first time since our wedding, uneasiness crept through me. I told him no, firmly. His face darkened immediately. Something subtle but chilling shifted in the air. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. He brought it up during meals, during car rides, before bed. Sometimes he was sweet, kissing my forehead and telling me he wanted to make life easier for me. Other times he snapped, accusing me of not trusting him, guilt-tripping me, making me feel selfish. The emotional whiplash was exhausting. I felt torn between wanting to protect my parents' memory and wanting to keep peace in my marriage. One evening, after a particularly intense argument, he grabbed my hands and whispered, "If you love me, prove it. Let me take care of everything. Let me take care of you." His voice trembled with manufactured emotion, and I, emotionally worn, craving harmony, desperate to save what I thought was love, felt my resolve weakening. I didn't realize it then, but Ethan had been waiting for that moment. Waiting for my exhaustion, my vulnerability, my surrender. A few days later, shaking inside but trying to be a good wife, I signed the papers he placed in front of me. And with a single signature, I unknowingly handed him not just my inheritance, but the power to destroy my life. The day I signed those papers felt strangely quiet, almost unnaturally calm, like the universe was holding its breath. I remember sitting at the dining table, the afternoon light pouring through the windows, turning everything golden. Ethan placed the documents in front of me with a gentle smile, the same smile that once made me feel safe. His voice was soft, reassuring, carefully crafted to sound loving. "It's just a formality," he said. "A way to protect what's ours." I should have listened to the tiny voice inside me that screamed something was wrong, but I silenced it. I told myself this was marriage, trust, sacrifice, compromise. I wanted to be a good partner. I wanted harmony. I didn't want to lose him. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. Ethan gently placed his hand on my shoulder. "You're doing the right thing," he whispered. I swallowed hard and signed my name, Madison Carter, in smooth blue ink. A simple line, a simple motion. And yet, in that moment, the world I knew quietly ended. I had no idea I had just given away every piece of security my parents left for me. No idea I had stepped into a trap designed with patience and precision. No idea the man standing next to me wasn't relieved or grateful, but victorious. The change didn't happen instantly. Ethan didn't storm out the door or tear off a mask the way villains do in movies. His transformation was slow and deliberate, like peeling back layers he had hidden so carefully. That same evening, he kissed my forehead, thanked me for trusting him, and said he'd take the documents to his lawyer first thing in the morning. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe in us. But deep down, a quiet anxiety settled into my stomach and refused to leave. The next few days revealed everything I had been too blind to see. Ethan stopped asking how my day was. He stopped sitting beside me during meals. He stopped texting me during his breaks. His affection evaporated, replaced with a cold distance that grew sharper with every passing hour. I told myself he was tired, stressed, adjusting to new responsibilities. But the truth was much darker. He had what he wanted now, and he no longer needed to pretend. Soon, the late nights began. He'd leave the house after dinner without telling me where he was going. Sometimes he came home smelling like alcohol and expensive perfume. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. When I asked where he'd been, he laughed it off, saying I was being dramatic. "You worry too much," he would say, brushing past me as if I were nothing more than a piece of furniture placed in his way. One night, he came home close to dawn. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair messy, his eyes glazed. When I confronted him, he rolled his eyes and said, "You don't get to question me. Not anymore." The words hit me like a slap. I stood frozen, watching the man I once trusted walk past me without even looking back. Something inside me cracked, but I couldn't bring myself to react. I felt too small, too foolish, too broken. As days turned into weeks, his behavior worsened. He threw parties at our home without asking me. I would find empty bottles scattered across the living room, lipstick stains on glasses, strangers lounging on our furniture. When I told him this wasn't the life I wanted, he snarled, "Then leave. This house is mine. Everything here is mine. You gave it to me." His words pierced me deeper than anything he had ever said.
Mine, mine, mine.
He said it not with pride, but with ownership. I felt like I had given him the keys to my entire life and now stood outside my own world, watching him tear it apart piece by piece. One afternoon, I decided to look at the documents I had signed, just to ease the anxiety that had been twisting inside me. When I opened the drawer where the paper should have been, I found it empty. Ethan had taken everything, every contract, every deed, every financial file. Panic shot through my body. I felt a cold dread settle in my bones as the truth finally sank in. My signature hadn't united us. It had erased me. From that day forward, Ethan didn't even bother pretending anymore. He treated me like an inconvenience, a shadow occupying space in his house, a leftover obligation. And I, once the owner of $5 million, once the daughter of loving parents, felt stripped down to nothing. I learned too late that trust, when given to the wrong person, becomes a weapon. And Ethan was more than willing to use it against me. The weeks after Ethan took full control of my inheritance were a slow descent into a version of my life I never imagined I would experience. It didn't happen suddenly. It wasn't one incident or one argument that changed him. It was a gradual unraveling, like watching a thread being pulled from the edge of a sweater, helpless as it unravels everything it once held together. Ethan no longer pretended to be the man I married. The warmth in his eyes vanished. The gentleness in his voice disappeared. The affection, the care, the thoughtful gestures, everything dissolved into a chilling indifference. It started with the silence. He stopped speaking to me unless he needed something: his jacket, his keys, information about a bill, or a reminder of an appointment. Small talk evaporated. Meals became lonely, even when he was sitting across from me. He would scroll through his phone while I ate quietly, pretending not to notice the way my heart broke a little more each day. When he finally decided to engage with me, it wasn't to be kind. It was to belittle, criticize, or mock me. "You're too sensitive. You never understand anything. You'd be lost without me. This is why you needed me to take over." Every insult was sharp, precise, delivered with a casual cruelty that left me stunned. I tried convincing myself he was stressed, overwhelmed, tired. But deep down I knew better. His mask had finally come off, and the man underneath was someone I didn't recognize at all. Then the alcohol entered the picture. He began drinking almost every night. The smell of whiskey clung to his clothes like a second skin. Sometimes he stumbled through the front door at midnight, sometimes at dawn. I would sit awake on the couch, waiting, praying he was safe, even though he no longer cared whether I was. When he saw me waiting, he scoffed, "Stop acting like my mother." Other nights, he accused me of spying on him or trying to control him. I never raised my voice, but he always found a way to twist my silence into a wrongdoing. Sometime in the middle of this nightmare, the neglect turned into something darker. It happened in small flashes, his hand grabbing my wrist too tightly, his voice rising sharply, his eyes filled with a rage I didn't understand. Once, when I asked him about a charge on one of the accounts, he slammed his fist onto the counter so hard I jumped. "Don't question me," he growled. "You lost that right the day you signed everything over." Each moment chipped away at my fear until only numbness remained. But the night everything shattered, the night he pushed me, began like any other miserable evening. He came home smelling like a mix of alcohol and perfume, his shirt unbuttoned, his hair messy. My stomach twisted as I asked, softly, "Where were you?" I tried to keep my voice steady, calm, respectful, anything to avoid provoking him. He stopped in the hallway and turned toward me slowly, his eyes narrowing with irritation. "Who do you think you are to question me?" he snapped. "I was just worried," I began. "Worried?" He laughed bitterly. "You should worry about yourself. You're nothing without me. Nothing." Something inside me, something fragile but long suppressed, finally cracked. "Ethan, this isn't you," I whispered. "You're hurting me. You've changed." He stepped toward me, anger radiating from his body. "Changed," he repeated mockingly. "I'm the same. You're just finally seeing the truth." I backed away instinctively, moving closer to the staircase as he approached. My hands shook, my breath caught in my throat. "Please stop," I said quietly. "I don't want to fight." That was when it happened, a second, a blur, a burst of rage. He grabbed my arm, his grip harsh and unforgiving. I winced. "Stop acting like a victim," he snarled, and before I could take another breath, he shoved me. My foot slipped off the edge of the top stair. The world tilted. I felt my body fall, crashing down step after step. Pain exploded through my back, my ribs, my legs. When I finally hit the bottom, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My vision blurred as tears streamed down my face, mixing with the taste of blood on my lips. I looked up, hoping, needing him to come to me. But Ethan stood at the top of the stairs, staring down with cold, empty eyes. Then he turned away and walked out the door, leaving me broken, helpless, alone on the floor of my own home. If it weren't for Gloria, the housemaid, I might have died there. But fate wasn't done with me yet. I don't know how long I lay at the bottom of the stairs, unable to move, drifting in and out of consciousness. Time didn't feel real. Everything was blurred by pain, sharp, crushing pain that spread through my back and chest like fire. My breath came in short, desperate gasps as I tried to call for help, but my voice was barely a whisper. The house felt eerily silent, except for the faint ringing in my ears. I remember thinking, this is how I die alone, in my own home, because of the man I loved. Then I heard footsteps, fast, panicked footsteps. It was Gloria. She had just arrived for her evening shift, humming softly, like she always did. The second she saw me on the floor, her scream echoed through the hallway. Madison. Oh my God. What happened? Her voice trembled as she knelt beside me, afraid to touch me. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't form. I could only look at her with glassy eyes, hoping she understood. And she did. Without wasting another second, she grabbed her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. I listened to her voice as she begged for help. Please, send an ambulance. She fell. She's not moving. Please hurry. Her desperation filled the room, and for the first time since Ethan pushed me, I felt the tiniest sliver of hope. Minutes later, the paramedics arrived. They moved quickly but gently, whispering to each other as they assessed my injuries. One of them placed an oxygen mask over my face, another stabilized my neck, and another asked Gloria questions. She explained everything she saw, including the part where Ethan walked out and left me on the floor. I saw a shock flicker in the paramedics' eyes, though they tried to hide it. The lights on the ambulance were blinding as they carried me out on a stretcher. The siren wailed as we sped through the city, and I stared at the ceiling above me, trying to hold on, trying not to slip into the darkness pulling at me. When we arrived at the hospital, I was rushed into the trauma room, surrounded by bright lights, medical tools, and voices calling out instructions. Possible spinal injury. Severe bruising on the ribs. Get the scans ready. Stay with us, Madison. Time blurred again. I remember the cold of the CT scan table, the burn of the 4, and the numbness in my limbs. Then a doctor leaned over me, Dr. Emily Ward. She introduced herself gently, her voice calm and reassuring. You're going to be okay, she said. You've been through something very serious, but you're in the right place now. When I finally woke up properly, I was in a hospital room, wrapped in blankets, machines beeping softly around me. Gloria sat in a chair nearby, tears still drying on her cheeks. The moment she saw my eyes open, she rushed to my side. You're safe now, she whispered. But I didn't feel safe.
Not yet.
A few minutes later, the door opened, and a police officer walked in, Detective Ryan Cooper. He introduced himself politely, but with a seriousness that made my stomach drop. Miss Carter, I'm sorry for what happened to you, he said. We need to ask a few questions if you're able. My voice shook as I recounted the night, the argument, the shove, the fall, Ethan leaving me there. Every word felt like ripping open a wound. Gloria confirmed everything she had witnessed. The detective wrote everything down with careful precision. Then he said the words that changed everything. Madison, what your husband did is a criminal act. We're opening an investigation immediately. Hearing it spoken aloud made it real. Ethan wasn't just cruel. He wasn't just manipulative. He was dangerous. And he had tried to kill me. The next day, my lawyer, Rebecca Moore, arrived. She took one look at me, my bruised arms, my swollen face, the tears I tried so hard to hide, and she said, We're going to bring him down. You're not alone in this anymore. We spent hours reviewing everything, photos of my injuries, medical reports, financial documents showing how Ethan manipulated me, and Gloria's statement as the eyewitness. Rebecca explained the charges. Attempted murder, domestic violence, and financial fraud. Each charge felt heavy but right.
Just.
Necessary. The hospital became my fortress, while the investigation grew stronger. Ethan didn't visit. He didn't call. He didn't even pretend to care. That silence alone said everything. But as I lay there, healing slowly, surrounded by doctors, police, and a lawyer determined to fight for me, I realized something powerful. Ethan had taken my trust, my inheritance, my safety, but he hadn't taken my will to survive. For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt something rise inside me. Not fear.
Not sorrow. Strength.
Sitting in that courtroom felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold instead of my own. The polished wooden benches, the cold air conditioning brushing against my skin, the quiet whispers echoing around me, it all felt distant, almost muted. I sat beside my lawyer, Rebecca Moore, wearing a loose sweater to cover the fading bruises on my arms. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear this time. It was anticipation. Justice was close, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't running from the truth. I was facing it head-on. When Ethan entered the courtroom with his attorney, my breath hitched. He looked nothing like the man I once loved. His expression was hardened, defensive, almost annoyed, as if he were the victim in all of this. When his eyes briefly met mine, I expected guilt or shame, something human. But all I saw was irritation, as if my survival inconvenienced him. The judge entered, Judge Anderson, stern, composed, and intimidating in a way that made me sit a little straighter. The trial began with opening statements. Rebecca's voice was steady, powerful, filled with the truth of everything Ethan had done. She spoke about my injuries, the manipulation, the financial fraud, the attempt on my life. She painted the picture clearly, fact by fact, emotion by emotion, and for the first time, my suffering felt visible, undeniable. Ethan's lawyer tried to twist the story, claiming I had fallen accidentally, that the transfer of assets was consensual, that Ethan was being unfairly targeted. But the lies crumbled one by one when the evidence was presented. Photos of my injuries. Medical reports confirming trauma consistent with being pushed. Financial documents showing how he had manipulated the transfer of ownership. And the strongest part, Gloria's testimony. Gloria stood there, hands shaking slightly, voice trembling yet brave, as she recounted the night she found me at the bottom of the stairs. She explained how Ethan had walked out without offering help, how he had left me motionless on the floor. Watching her testify made my heart ache. She didn't owe me anything. She wasn't family or a lifelong friend. She simply cared, and that simple truth meant more than anything Ethan had ever pretended to give me. Then came my turn. Standing in front of the courtroom, telling my story in my own words, felt like peeling layers off wounds I had tried so hard to hide. My voice cracked more than once, but I didn't stop. I told them everything. How he pursued me, how he created the illusion of love, how he pressured me into signing over my inheritance, how he isolated me, and finally, how he pushed me down the stairs and left me to die. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Ethan sat there stiffly, jaw clenched, eyes cold. He didn't look remorseful. He looked angry, angry that I survived, angry that I spoke, angry that I took back control. Judge Anderson reviewed everything carefully before delivering his verdict. His voice echoed through the silent room as he addressed Ethan directly, condemning his actions as deliberate, manipulative, and violent. Then he delivered the judgment. Ethan was sentenced to several years in prison for attempted murder and domestic violence. He was ordered to repay every cent he had stolen or manipulated from me. The transfer of my inheritance was legally reversed in full, and a permanent restraining order was issued, protecting me for life. When the gavel struck, a wave of emotion washed over me. Relief, grief, strength, and something I hadn't felt in a long time. Closure. As Ethan was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, he turned his head just slightly, giving me one last look. But this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink. I didn't tremble. I watched him go with steady eyes, finally free from the fear he once controlled me with. In the weeks that followed, I focused on healing, not just my body, but my heart. I returned home, reclaimed my space, and made changes that brought light back into my life. I attended therapy, learned to breathe without flinching, learned to sleep without nightmares, and learned to trust myself again. I began rebuilding my future, one filled not with fear, but with possibility. I took back my education, my independence, my choices. I repainted rooms, replaced old memories, planted flowers in the garden. I even stood on the balcony one morning as the sun rose, feeling warmth on my skin, realizing I had survived something that was meant to break me. And slowly, I understood something powerful. Ethan took so much from me, my trust, my peace, my sense of safety. But he didn't take me. I was still here, still breathing, still standing, stronger than before, and finally free. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Your support helps this channel grow, and I truly appreciate every one of you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.